On this channel, we don't really care how good a game was 30 years ago. We're all about advising you what will be fun if you drag a game out now, possibly in your spare hour between the kids going to bed and you falling face first into yours. So while I'm sure we won't be the only channel to take a look at every game on Sega's interesting looking new Mega Drive Mini, we're coming at it from that angle. Whether a title is new to me or not, it's getting 15 minutes to decide how well it holds up in this strange new world of equal marriage, planking and Brexit. The good, the bad and the ugly, basically. For obvious accent-based reasons, I'm working off the British units lineup here, but other than names, the Americans are getting the same. We've got 42 to get through, so we'd better get started with part 1. And first up is... Alex Kidd in the Enchanted Castle. Alex Kidd was Sega's 8-bit hero. Sonic of the 80s, if you will, and the release of Sonic quickly eclipsed his thunder. Enchanted Castle was his only 16-bit outing. Rock, paper, scissors is a hell of a gimmick to base a game off, and for me it's the chief downfall of this. It ends up being a series of double platform levels with aggressive collision detection and uninteresting scenery, which largely exist so you can make money to go bet on games of rock, paper, scissors. Those, of course, are just chance-based, and so collect enough money and they're just grinding. The graphics, being big chunky Mega Drive sprites, actually lose some of the charm of the 8-bit games as well. Ultimately, I see why this was the last one, especially with Sonic less than a year away on the European release of this. Other than curiosity, if you're an Alex Kidd fan, don't bother with this, go back and play Miracle World. Alyssia Dragooned. This is the first one I'd not heard of, much less played, and that's understandable, because apparently the game bombed outside Japan. It's a side-scrolling murder them up, with the gimmick of you bringing along one of 4 pet goons, including a dragon. Dragoon. Ah, I get it now. You can have any of them in play at any given time, it's an easy swap. It's visceral, isn't it? It's nice to have a gaming protagonist from this era, especially a woman, who kicks a decent amount of arse. And when fully powered up, her attack is basically a smart bomb. Which means you can't just go running in and blowing stuff up. You have to be a little safe and strategic. The selectable helpers are a nice touch, and all have their own strength, be it fireballs or even just as a shield. It looks bloody wonderful, and sounds even better. It's also bastard hard. In my allocated time, I've crawled to level 2, where the enemy variety ramps straight back up. This is going on my list to explore more when I've got the proper machine, and I suggest you stick it on yours. Altered Beast. Altered Beast was the original Halo title for the Mega Drive. Think like Ridge Racer for the PlayStation, or well, literally Halo for the first Xbox. This was the look at what this machine can do title, and a line in the sand for how arcade conversions were going to be from now on. It was also the game given away with the machine right up until Sonic took over everything. And yeah, fair play, it looks good at times, but this is one I do remember, and I remember a slow, ponderous, dull punch-em-up. And that's exactly what this still is. It's thin even for an arcade game, and while technically I can see the attraction at the time, and there is something to be said for being able to walk up to a zombie and kick him square in the nuts, it's just not fun. Even as the werewolf beast of the title. Unless you have a particularly strong connection to this game, this one's a no. Beyond Oasis. Beyond Oasis is, for want of a better term, a Zelda-like RPG, and not having played this, we do of course run into the problem that they're impossible to get a really good grasp on in 15 minutes. Prince Ali finds the mysterious gold amulet, which royally pisses off someone. They attack a lot, and it eventually transpires that their silver amulet, which has the power to do a bunch of bad things, can be counteracted by the spirits the gold amulet will let you find. I only played essentially the tutorial zone in my 15 minutes, but in that time this acquits itself well. The plot is interesting, it controls well, it has a lovely looking art style. It's got music from Sega legend Yuzo Koshiro, whose music will also adorn the menu of the Mega Drive Mini itself. It's got all the usual Zelda-like tropes, right up to the weapons that break, and magic spirits to help you. It reminded me immediately of Secret of Mana, and it turns out the reviewers tended to agree with that one, IGN saying exactly so when they reviewed the Wii re-release. Wheelies. You're going to need to sink time into this one to do it justice, but if you're a natural player of Zelda-style RPGs and you haven't played this, prepare to lose some time. A thumbs up. Castle of Illusion. The first of 2 Mickey Mouse games on this machine, and pleasingly, the first alphabetically was also the first chronologically. That's a freebie for a list like this. I never played the Mega Drive one at the time, possibly ever, but I was a huge fan of it in the Master System, so I expect much here. Castle doesn't quite have the incredible animation of the later Disney movie games, although Mickey disappearing in this footage is a slightly unfortunate side effect of my video capturing. 30 seconds in though, it already has more ideas than most games manage in a lifetime. In my 15 minutes, I played 2 of the worlds. Firstly, this forest world, which includes this imaginative and creepy bonus stage, and an even creepier night level. The world ends with this boss, which could be out of nightmare both with and without a K. Most games would move on with a similar looking world too, but Mickey finds himself in a toy box with animatronic toys. It's easy to see why Castle is so well remembered, and even easier to understand why it's still ace. I've never played World of Illusion, which is coming along later, and I'm already looking forward to it. A heavy yes for Castle of Illusion. Castlevania Bloodlines. Bloodlines is interesting. It's one of the overlooked Castlevania games, either because of or in spite of being the only Mega Drive one, and a Sega exclusive at a time where most people associated Castlevania with Nintendo. It wasn't re-released in any form until this, its 25th year, where, as well as being on the Mega Drive Mini, you'll find it in the new Castlevania Anniversary Collection for everything. I'm more on the Metroid side of the Metroidvania debate, and I've not played this. From the first 15 minutes, it feels like a reasonably generic platformer hack and slash. It's incredibly atmospheric and has some impressive effects, certainly, but it's not super interesting for a newcomer. While I understand you get some fancier item-based weapons a bit later, the default whip is slightly too difficult to aim properly, and I was hit by things I could see coming a mile off because they were 2 pixels too low to hit, which is a little unfriendly for me. If you're a Castlevania nut, don't let this put you off. Bloodlines was the highest rated entry in the series before we get to its incredible PS1 debut. And if its Sega location and lack of re-releases meant you missed it, go straight there. For the rest of us, it's a PlayStation and Symphony of the Night you should be looking out for. Columns. You know Tetris, said Ian Sega. We're going to need one of those. Columns is about matching colours rather than building structures, but this was a shameless play for Nintendo's puzzle game crown. I've never been so fond of these colour rather than shape versions of the concept, but Columns is probably the original and best as far as most of the Western world is concerned. The Mega Drive version also includes the arcade machine style mode alongside a traditional Tetris-like level structure game, and a Rescue the Flashing Cube mode that was probably my favourite part of the title in my short reacquaintance with it. I do like how the arcade machine mode gets difficult quickly though. One of the reasons I don't play Game Boy Tetris super often is that the beginning game can drag if you're just playing it straight. So a conditional yes? Columns is not a classic on the level of Tetris, but it's a good addition to the system at least. Its biggest problem might be what's coming up in 3 games' time. First though, Comic Zone.
Test 1, 2. Sega.
The peak of the Sega Technical Institute's Mega Drive outings is this concept beat-em-up platformer where a creator is dragged into his own comic book by the major villain and has to fight his way through the panels to get out. Comic Zone is technically beautiful. The comic book aesthetic is fully leaned into, with everything taking place in the panels. The music is some of the best to be forced through the Mega Drive sound chip, and ironically is not cartoony at all. It is, however, slight and very difficult. I've never got much into level 2, and its lack of continues beyond the ends of very large levels, and the fact you only ever have a single life, means it's a stunningly unforgiving game. Especially as it robs you of health for things you can't avoid, like kicking barrels out of the way, or this fall onto some flames I'm not even sure you can avoid. Which sounds like I'm going to say don't play it. But do, because it's somehow still great. Comix Zone is the kind of thing that would be an undiscovered gem of a system's library if not for the fact that it's become somewhat famous over the years. Contra Hardcore. Or, if you want to be all British about this, Probotector. I've left it as Contra here because I want to talk about it close to Castlevania, with which it has much in common. Probotector is also a Sega-only entry in a series that until then had been a Nintendo thing, and is also a Konami game. It's also another I don't think has had a re-release before now. This, however, is more me. It's a run-and-gun game, and I'm all about the long-range Doom. It's also equally unforgiving. There's a million enemies, you have 3 lives, and it's all one-hit kills. That said, the carnage is immense. This is a really intense treat for the eyes, especially towards the end of my test of it when I started getting some better weapons in on the mix. As you can see from this, I was having 2-minute average games, but in general they were getting longer every time, and it seems worth the practice. Some of the demos it cycles through are spectacular. I briefly broke Protocol on a tip-off to try the Japanese version, which it turns out offers a health bar and infinite continues. That makes a huge difference, and allowed me to get a little further where the game runs into a pile of really excellent set pieces. You should play this on your Euro Mega Drive Mini, sure, but I hope there's a trick to play the Japanese version on it, because it's just forgiving enough to transition it from frustrating to fun. And there's half a chance there will be that trick, because... Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine. You know columns, said Ian Sega. We're going to need that again. Mean Bean Machine is, basically, columns again. In fact, what it is Puyo Puyo in English. To the extent that, at least on the American Mega Drive Mini, if you set the language settings to the right place in Asia, you literally get Puyo Puyo. In basic gameplay, the differences between this and columns are simply that you have batches of 2 rather than 3, they can rotate, and we're looking for 4 in connection, not 3. The scenario mode is a versus affair over a range of levels where, like in a lot of games like this, your success throws useless blocks into your opponent's playfield. It does have a practice mode that's more what you'd call a traditional game, but it's too easy for too long, so actually you'd rather play columns. Really, I think this existed in Europe to get some more mileage out of the Sonic IP, and you could argue the wisdom of having both this and columns on here. I guess Columns is a fairly famous launch title, and this does have a gimmick. Columns though is probably the better 2019 game. There's a million versions of Puyo Puyo around, and you should probably try those instead of this. And that's part 1. Several thumbs up in the first 10, but if you're looking for a single game to try first, it's got to be Castle of Illusion. This was the golden age of 2D platformers, and this is a great chance to reacquaint yourself with one of the very best. Then join me for part 2 soon, from Dynamite Heady to Light Crusader. If you live in the far future, there'll even be a link to it in 3, 2, 1, boom. Goodbye.